Nick Akers, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Nice to be here. Appreciate it.
Nick, you acquired an MSP, a managed service provider. This is a category that we hear about a lot in search, but I've actually not yet had on a guest who bought an MSP, so we'll hear about the industry of MSPs. You also worked with a search accelerator to buy this business, so we're going to hear all about that as well, and so much more. Nick, please start us off with some background on you.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks again, Will, for letting me join your great show here. So my background by way of education is master's in chemistry. And while I was doing that work, happened to invent something kind of in the advanced materials category that happened to garner a lot of popular interest. Was in popular science, for example, was mentioned in a Ray Kurzweil novel. And so, got this crazy idea to try to start a company with this invention. So figured out how to license the technology from the university I was at, participated in a few kind of startup contests and ultimately raised some venture capital funding. And, all told, raised, roughly $25 million. This was, this was close to 20 years ago. So that was a lot of money back then to raise from VCs. It was a great experience. I had never had any business classes or finance classes while in university. It was just pure science track. So had to learn all of those aspects of running a business, hiring employees, all the legal, just everything. Really, really good experience. And then we ended up bringing in Emerson Electric as their strategic at about that 8-year mark. And, I was still very young, had no interest in working for a big, large multinational. And it was just a very natural way to separate from that activity.
Was that like a good exit for a young founder? I mean, give us, net it out for us. Did you do well?
I did okay. So again, I think the VC environment at that time, nearly 20 years ago, is very different than it is today. Today there's a lot of emphasis on protecting the founder's position. Back then, that was not the case, at least in my situation and a lot of the other founders that I know during those times. So, I experienced quite heavy dilution throughout the multiple rounds of fundraising. So it was perfectly fine. It certainly wasn't life-changing, but, I think the experience far outweighs whatever monetary gains there were.
Thank you. Okay, so after your exit to the strategic, Emerson Electric, carry on in your story, please.
Yes, so I joined an engineering design and build firm and was running sales and business development for them. This was a really fascinating job to me and was tremendous fun. Probably the smartest folks I ever worked with were at this company. And what we did was primarily in defense and commercial aerospace, designing, one-time unique pieces of equipment that would be used to test like the 787, for example, or test certain components in military jets, the F-35, F-15, F-18, all these types of things. So it was, again, just a really great opportunity and fun job. But I did that for a few years and was then recruited to join a company in the chemical manufacturing space. So, there were a few very interesting things there. One, it was my father-in-law's business. So, and I knew that there was no succession plan in place at that time. So, I was definitely thinking long-term of that potential opportunity. But then getting back to my chemistry roots, so to speak, and that business, when I joined, had not yet gone through the professionalization stage. It had gotten to a very nice size, probably 200 employees when I joined, but they didn't have the systems and processes in place. So, one of the number of things I did was really begin that professionalization. So establishing KPIs, doing very simple things that like the first budgeting process, the first time of implementing employee reviews, modernizing the whole IT infrastructure, recruiting and running their board. And it really transformed the business. And he was there for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years and doubled the company in size and revenue, employees and square footage, all these types of things.
Nick, when you say double the business, do you mean, are you the de facto leader of the business then at this point, even though your father-in-law is the owner?
So my title was managing director. It was really more of a president type role. My father-in-law was there every day, literally Saturdays and Sundays too. But I was driving all of this change. This was, I can't understate how dramatic of a change this was for the organization. I think it had been around for 30 years by the time I joined or so, and had been doing things the same way that whole time. So, again, a 30-year-old business, and now you're going to do an annual budget for the first time ever. These are big changes within those walls. Okay,
so you are leading the charge in the professionalization of this business, and it's seeing to great effect. All the key metrics have doubled essentially over how many years?
It was about 6 or 7 years.
Okay, and so then what happens at the end of 6 or 7 years? You are not now the owner of that business, so I take it that the succession plan did not play out that way.
Yeah, I think probably the best way I could summarize it is if you've seen the HBO show Succession, that's what it's really like. I saw
which character are you?
Oh, well,
none of the kids are very flattering portrayals. So
no,
hopefully none.
No, but I did see someone write a comment about that show that basically said they've never seen a demonstration of the ramifications of complex narcissistic abuse in families the way that show laid it out. And, I think that's really what was going on. I'm careful. I'm not looking to air any issues here. I think it is a very common. I think I know a lot of second and third generation family business folks, and everybody has the same stories. So I don't think it's really an uncommon thing. And we had just, the family dynamics, I think we had just reached a natural point of, I think it pushed the organization and pushed my father-in-law about as far as they could take. And it's just time to do something else.
And of course, the difference between you and Succession is that in Succession, it's their own father. In your case, it was your father-in-law, meaning it was probably more delicate because, that catches your wife in the middle. Is there anything to say about that, or does that fall into the let's not talk about it bucket?
No, I'm happy to comment on it. Look, truthfully, it was a traumatic experience. And I mean that very seriously, for myself, but also my wife. So it was rough. It got pretty dark there for a while.
So you leave that business, and then what? You've got a lot of, you're not yet 35 or not yet 40. Got a lot of experience. So what do you choose to do with this experience?
Well, I mean, the first, I think, natural reaction is you got to go find a job. And tried to do that. Certainly had some very good relationships. There was an owner of a fantastic business here in town that, he put me through the full interview process, essentially as a president of a division. It matched my skill set, almost perfectly, perhaps. But I remember after the full interview process with his full leadership team and everything, we went to lunch, and I could tell that he was very nervous. He was visibly nervous. So I knew what the answer was before he could even say the words, which was, it it just wasn't the right time. And his specific feedback was, look, you are too raw right now. I mean, you got too much going on. And he said, I don't think this would be good for you right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny how things work out. At the end of the day, because he said no, and many other things in the sequence of events, here I am today running this company and having a blast. And, that guy is on my board for this company. So it's great. I actually owe him a thank you for that decision. He knew something that I didn't. So, after that experience, I just knew that I had to find something for myself. There had always been this thread of ownership. Working for somebody else really wasn't going to fit the bill. And, thinking back on the time at different points along all of these companies, that engineering company at Joe's Chemical, I had looked at buying businesses, not seriously in the way you do during search. I would see something or I'd hear something or meet a broker and kind of take the first step. Certainly at the chemical company, we explored acquisition opportunities, looked at, very specific companies that we could acquire. And I had the beginnings of an acquisition thesis in that chemical space. So, after leaving there, I started to flesh that out in more detail and started to shop that acquisition thesis to private equity firms, and actually started working, and I guess it was a pseudo independent sponsor type activity that I was doing, although I wasn't being intentional about that, and really began pursuing deals with 2 private equity firms. And, they were giving me deal flow. I was generating deal flow myself via my network, but also cold calling brokers in the industry. And, we looked at a number of things in large 100 million plus acquisition situations, submitted LOIs, but obviously never got anything to close. I was doing that for probably 18 months, and then happened upon the search fund world. Had never heard that term before. Started to investigate that, and also at the same time came across Novastone Capital Advisors, which is like the accelerator type model, sponsored search model. And it was very intriguing to me because, one, I could get some compensation, not that it was entirely necessary, but this whole world of acquisition was very foreign to my wife. And so, I talked to her about this and, not bringing in income, and I'm gone, all the time. Like, what are you doing? Like, I don't understand what's going on here. Plus, you're not making any money. This sponsored search model had some appeal. I applied to Novastone, was accepted, and became their first searcher in the US. So Novastone originated in Europe. It's Swiss-based, and they were bringing the program to the US at that time. So first searcher in the US, and ultimately closed their first US deal.
How did you come across Novastone?
I think truthfully, I saw it come across my LinkedIn feed, and whatever ad they were running was intriguing enough for me to click on. And it was started with a simple, self-recorded video interview, maybe a 2-minute little pitch, and then followed by what ended up being the most rigorous interview process I've been through. It took about 6 months, many rounds, some financial modeling, testing, all types of different things, and was ultimately accepted.
Wow. That's so 6 months just to be accepted into Novastone, that leaving aside your actual search. That's just when the actual search begins.
That's right.
Yeah. And you had said that your wife, as many of my guests have said about their own partners or people in their networks, it's like they don't understand what a search is or what you're doing, but they do understand you're not making any money. And so you liked the idea of Novastone, which is a search accelerator, because they have kind of traditional search fund terms, which include subsidizing or funding the search process for you. So you are making an income, probably less than you would make in industry, but you're making something, so you can take that and show that to your wife. And of course, it does help. It's not purely symbolic. What else did you like about their offering? And yeah, tell me more about what intrigued you, because let me reframe. So most of my guests have been self-funded and kind of just gone out there and figured things out. Maybe they've been through some sort of educational program, but a lot of it has kind of been self-taught, listening to the pods, reading the books. And so an accelerator, I'm always interested to hear about one's experience with an accelerator. So tell us what you can about that experience, why you chose it, what you liked.
Sure. I also was looking at, I had this history of looking at larger deals with the private equity firms. So I wanted to continue to have the opportunity to play in that space. And the Novastone program looked like it would allow me to do so. So, their target range is in the 2 to 5 million of EBITDA, can go higher in some cases, perhaps up to even 8 or 9. And so that also fit with the very specific industry thesis that I had and what I personally wanted to achieve. They also have a fairly significant team of folks that support you in their search. So, they have an M&A team that helps you with all the financial modeling. They have in-house legal to supplement different stages. They have, an outreach team that can help you generate lists. So I viewed kind of the whole program as a way that would accelerate my search and improve the odds of success. And I think that proved itself true during the various stages.
That's great. And that does sound like a lot of added value. Now, the terms, traditional search fund terms, the economics are also a giant question here. They're perceived as slightly less favorable than self-funded, at least from a very kind of crude sense of how much of the business you, searcher, entrepreneur, will ultimately own. Now, traditional search fund folks will say, yeah, but typically you're going to be buying a bigger business. So yeah, smaller piece, but of a bigger pie. Did you think about that at all? Did you have other models of buying a business where you could compare and contrast those terms?
Honestly, no. I mean, I did at least understand that the Novastone terms were very much in line with the traditional sponsored search terms. But I was not doing this for any financial motivations. I was doing this for something different, which was really to prove certain aspects of leadership that I believe strongly in. My experience at the chemical company, I think, achieved a lot of great resume building things, doubling the size of a business, building a factory in Poland, running a board, all of these types of things. But what I couldn't solve for was culture. And that bothered me. So my motivation to do a search and ultimately, be the person in charge was to prove that a certain type of culture that is really, an employee first type mentality will work. So that's why I did this.
Well, let's double click on this a little bit, Nick. So, because culture can be, it's one of those things. It's very amorphous, and and sometimes it can even be poo-pooed. I mean, probably by leaders of companies that have bad cultures. That's why they have bad cultures, because they don't take it seriously. But what, for maybe people listening who underestimate the value of culture or haven't gone through the experience you did of a bad culture, what would you tell them? Just to elaborate on this hot button thing for you, this thing that was so hot button that it was your entire why for this next phase of your career.
Yeah. So, I guess having seen perhaps the very negative side of this, living through that affects you. If anybody is familiar or looks into kind of the Simon Sinek or Barry Waymiller is a company that has a lot of material about this employee first style, and they have statistics. Don't hold me to the numbers, but they have very high statistics that a bad boss can contribute something like 80% of the negative health effects on a person than anything else in their life. So it really does affect people. So, what's the opposite of that? And we can talk about some of the things I've done here in short order, but when you create a really excellent culture that allows people to do their best and people come to work excited, they come to work empowered. I could give you very specific examples of just little changes for folks here that I've seen, as a salesperson, just start hitting it out of the park just by supporting them and listening to them, listening to what they want and letting them go do what they're best at. You just wouldn't believe how this person has changed for me in just 2 months. It's amazing.
That's so cool, Nick. Well, not to trivialize this question of culture, but I thought it was interesting how Succession and Ted Lasso, these two shows were both very popular and both airing contemporaneously, and I was watching both. And really, they're both kind of shows about the same thing, which Succession, one about just toxicity and dysfunction and just the it's just exhausting and bleak to watch that show. Meanwhile, you have Ted Lasso, which is a show about, this unlikely leader and the incredible ripple effects of a guy who's an exceptional leader and how powerful that is and how it just changes everyone around him and just elevates everyone, both individually and collectively. So these two shows are just two sides of one coin, which is culture. So anyway, encourage the audience to watch both, but together. Don't watch just one or the other because we want to see a full picture of this. All right, Nick, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, perhaps to put a finishing point on it is, when, I was told that the type of culture I'm describing doesn't work. And, the surest way to get me to go prove something is to tell me that what you're saying isn't possible.
What had you said that this person responded, well, that can't work? What had you said? I'm going to create a company with a good culture. What were they so discouraging about?
Well, I think it's, perhaps the criticism that you alluded to at the beginning there that, no, culture is not, having a great culture doesn't result in growth. You got to just tell people what to do constantly, micromanage them, beat them up, yell at them, all this type of stuff. Otherwise, the employees are just going to sit around trying to get one over on you all the time. That type of attitude.
Okay, Nick. Well, that was a bit of a digression, but not really, because it really is so central to your story. But we got to catch up here a little bit on the plot. So you're working with Novastone. Tell us some about the search itself.
Yes. So my search started in December of 21, officially, and I had raised my search capital on a perhaps hyper-specific search thesis at a very particular part of the specialty chemical sector, for obvious reasons, and began looking there. I thought I would leverage my network and do the whole proprietary thing, just like everybody kind of says at one point. You know, began working with brokers in that space. Got some deal flow. You know, found one really great opportunity in the specialty chemical space. You know, just a perfect fit kind of for the reason for succession. In search, there were 3 owners, all of retirement age, that wanted to get out. It aligned excellent with my background. It was not near to me, so I went and visited. They were very forthcoming with information, transparent, even let me meet all of their employees. This was all pre-LOI. So it felt like it was going in the right direction entirely. But, you know, I wasted a lot of time, frankly, through all of these steps to ultimately get to an offer that was high on the multiple side of what I think you see in search. It was close to a 7x, and the reason for that is they were on their way to a 7 million EBITDA.
Yeah,
it was just a great business. So I thought it was a fair price, was solving their succession, but ultimately they said no. Clearly, you know, I'm not really clear on the reasons why. They still own the business. But wasted probably 6 months and was doing all the other, you know, pipeline building as well in that time frame and pursuing other deals. But it was that experience, as I know a lot of your folks and guests now talk about, that really shifted me to focusing on broker deals almost exclusively. You know, at least, you know, there's a somewhat serious seller on the other side of things. So this brought me to about the middle of summer of 22, and was going in addition to looking at the brokered opportunities, I expanded beyond the specialty chemical thesis, because other deals that I was looking at in that space, the prices were just too high for the search fund model. You know, everything was over a 5, you know, some cases 10 plus. So it just didn't fit. And I was starting to feel the pressure of time, which was the reason for broadening the lens on industries. And, you know, so continued to look at a number of things, submitted a few LOIs. I really didn't submit that many LOIs throughout the whole journey, maybe 5 or 6. And then came across, I was just actually having a networking lunch with a local business broker. Didn't know of any deals that he had. Going into that lunch, sat down, explained search funds, which this individual was not familiar with, explained the focus on solving the succession issue. And after that dialogue, then he brought up what became this opportunity in St. Louis communications. And the trick there was really solving the succession challenge. The owner did not want to sign up for private equity. He wanted to retire. So it was really kind of a perfect, I think that lunch was beginning of September of 22. We went under LOI Christmas Eve and then closed on May 5th.
So that's 8 or 9 months from that first meeting. Yeah. And closed on May 5th means you just passed your 2-month mark. So this is a very recent acquisition.
It is. We are still in the honeymoon phase for sure. You know, I'm having a tremendous amount of fun. It seems like the folks here are really enjoying the transition. We have plenty of problems, but you know, we solve those problems and just keep moving forward.
And so St. Louis communications. So you're in St. Louis, just to be totally clear, right?
That's right.
Great. And then just back into the search for a minute. So you're working with Novastone for this. And so for the duration of all of this, you're getting the support, you're getting modeling, you're getting search support. One of the things that accelerators can also provide that can be so helpful is comrades, other folks in your cohort who are searching alongside you. Given that you were the only, their first and I assume only American at the time, were there other people in your cohort, maybe in Europe, that you were having Zoom calls with?
No, I mean, that's a very good point you bring up. And So although I was there first in the U.S., they very quickly, within a matter of months, additional U.S.-based searchers were into the program. And so yes, of course, we would talk amongst ourselves, both the U.S.-based and the EU-based searchers, which was really great for obvious reasons. And the program has grown perhaps unbelievably. I think today, don't quote me on the numbers, but it's I think very close to 50 total searchers. So, and that's roughly broken up 50% in North America and the rest in Europe. So it's quite a large program.
And then going back to the economics for a second, maybe we should just remind people what traditional search fund economics look like for those who aren't super familiar. It's essentially traditional search fund economics, which you said Novastone is close to or exactly a replica of, but I'm not speaking for Novastone. I'm just speaking for traditional search funds, which are basically as you'll say, 8 1/3, 8 1/3, 8 1/3. So you as the searcher get 8.33% of the business upon closing. And then the second tranche of 8.33% vests over your tenure, I believe, over a certain number of years. You just earn it with time. So that gets you to 16 2/3% ownership of the business. I think I'm getting this right. I hope I'm not. I'm sure somebody will correct me if I am. And then the last tranche of 8.33% is based on performance, hitting certain growth or IRR numbers for the investors and the growth of the business. So you kind of have to, that's performance based. And so if you hit that, then you own 25% of the business. And that's kind of the ceiling. You're only, as a self-funded searcher, only ever going to own 25% of the business. And I don't want to digress too much, but self-funded searchers might own 100% of their business, or if they take on investors, they might own 80 or 60%. So 25% sounds like not a lot. But again, traditional searchers look for bigger businesses. So it's 25% of a larger pie, typically, not always, typically. And another counter argument is that, if you come at it from a different perspective, like a private equity perspective, where private equity shops will buy a business and then install a CEO or an operator, those CEO operators will often have a bit of equity in the business, but only a bit. I don't even want to say how much because I don't really know, but I get the impression like single digits. So from that perspective, 25% is actually a lot. So endlessly debated at this point, but the point to leave the audience with is just those numbers, and that 25% ownership max is what you're looking at based on time and based on performance. Anything to correct me on there, Nick, or does that feel right?
No, that's all correct from my experience and in the Novastone experience. And you're absolutely right to compare it to the private equity CEO model. In the instances I've been involved in, the CEO is 3 to 5% in that range. So yes, this allows you to earn more equity than that and pursuing decent sized deals.
Yeah. And now, Nick, because you didn't know much about search, you were not somebody consuming the pods and reading the books before you joined with Novastone. That actually happened rather quickly with you, that you started working with them and got involved in your search. But now you do listen to Acquiring Minds and consume other media, as I know. And so you know all these different structures, about self-funded, about buying smaller deals and owning 100% of them or much more than 25%. Do you reflect any differently on it now that you know what the range of options include? Do you envy at times self-funded folks, or or not at all?
Oh, that's a good question. Truthfully, I think for me, I'm in the right spot for me. Being able to you start with a business of this size, have a board of the quality of folks that I want to have, having the free cash flow to reinvest in the business in meaningful ways. I think this is the right thing for me.
Well, and as you said at the outset, the economics was not your primary criteria at all. You told us STL Communications. Did you give us a bullet points on the business? How many employees it is? It was founded in 1989, 1990. Can you go through those for us?
Yeah, sure. So yes, correct. Founded 1990, and there are 41 employees today. Operates in the IT managed service space, particularly what's called Unified Communication as a Service. UCaaS is the acronym. And this basically means any type of communication technology that companies are using, from their phone to Zoom to Teams, all of this type of stuff falls under the UCaaS umbrella. It seems to have a lot of the criteria that people look for and desire in search funds, recurring revenue, low capital, very sticky product. Of course, those were all of the things that attracted me to it as well.
Great. Okay. And so, and the size of the business, can you give us a picture there? I know you can't give us too much information, but Novastone requires that its searchers look for businesses of $2 million EBITDA and above. So we know it probably crossed that threshold. Is there any more color you can paint there?
Yeah, sure. Happy to provide as much as I can without being too specific. So, the search range for Novastone and myself was really in that 2 to 5 million of EBITDA. And, I think we fell in the sweet spot of that. Certainly the purchase multiple is important for all of us. I think we did very well there. So it's a great deal, decent size, plenty of real nice cash flow, and 41 smart folks that work here.
Okay, so you say that it operates in the UCaaS. What was that? Unified Communication as a Service. Was that right?
Yes.
That niche within MSPs. So anything communication related. But can you give us more about the MSP industry? Maybe you've already touched on why searchers like it so much, recurring revenue, sticky. Maybe some of the niches, maybe some of the opportunities, like for people who are really novice to the value of the MSP industry. Tell us what you know a little bit.
Yeah, so the MSP space, very broadly, in encompassing all of the different little niche areas in it, I believe is growing somewhere in the 5, 6, 7% compound annual growth. But I know specifically the UCaaS sector is growing at 15% in North America and 20% globally. Of course, the drivers that we would expect are all of the remote and hybrid work environment, but also just different technologies for communicating internally or externally with employees and customers. So, that high growth area was attractive as well as we look to create our value creation thesis. And the other really interesting statistic is, only about 25 or 30% of businesses have migrated to some type of cloud solution, which is really what, UCaaS operates on, although there are nuances to that. So, tremendous opportunity for customer acquisition. And the market is very fragmented. Lots and lots of companies in this space doing 1 million or maybe 2 million in revenue. And then you have, of course, very large ones. At least in my research and experience, finding somebody in this size range is less common. So, certainly there's consolidation opportunities, which is part of my plan with so many smaller companies out there.
So you say it's part of your plan. You STL, the business that you bought, is larger than a lot of the other players out there. So it smells like a platform acquisition to me. A good platform to go out and buy smaller bolt-ons, right? Is that kind of the idea?
It certainly is one of the pillars of my growth thesis. I'm looking at one company right now that's just a little bit above $1 million in revenue, close to 300,000 in SDE, looking very seriously at it, and an LOI is probably pending here very quickly. And I'm looking very seriously at another one that I don't remember if it was on your podcast where a guest said the fastest way to double the size of your business is with a signature. And
no, great line though.
And so this second one kind of falls in that category that, we all know there's a million miles between here and there, but, we're already off to the races and looking for other bolt-on opportunities.
Well, let me press you on that a little bit, as I'm sure your Nova Stone folks have. Doesn't feel a little early, a little overeager? You're only two months in the seat. You have that much confidence that you could do another deal? So soon? I mean?
Certainly. I don't want to trivialize the complexities here. The $1 million size one, I think would be fine. It's in a relatively close geography to us. They would roll right into my existing team, I think, fairly well. The larger one certainly is a different story, and we would be, appropriately thoughtful about that. That one poses other potential issues at this stage. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It is early. You need to be cautious, but also when an opportunity presents itself, don't let it pass.
Yeah. And are these opportunities presenting themselves because you are now somebody that people, your competitors or local folks, owners have heard through the grapevine, STL sold, and so they call you up, basically inbound deal flow because they heard about your deal with STL. Is that what's happening here?
No, I'm continuing to be intentional about the search process. So continuing the same playbook as I was doing in the search phase now as the CEO of this company. But related to your point, being able to point to this acquisition, both to the owners of these businesses, but also the brokers, has accelerated the ability to get in on these opportunities. So I do think that's a benefit.
On MSPs, the industry of MSPs, which is large. I mean, basically any outsourced IT. I don't even know if people use the word IT, the phrase information technology anymore, but any outsourced IT is, I guess, an MSP of some kind. So you can just imagine the flavors of MSPs out there. You play in UCaaS, but for the edification of the audience, rattle off some of the other niches that exist in MSP land, just to give us some more vocabulary and points of reference within MSPs.
Sure. And there are many more than I'm going to know. But particularly when you see these smaller companies that are in that $1 million or $2 million size range, they probably focus on just one or two areas. So you have companies that just focus on cybersecurity. You have companies that are very heavy on, backups and that just do server management. And you see companies that just focus on voice. So there's just so many of those little kind of singular focus companies out there. Whereas when you get to this size, we roll all of that into one shop. So as I, was looking at this and thinking about the opportunity and having come from a manufacturing background, I look at it, our number of offerings as kind of our manufacturing capacity, right? So we can go into a customer and say, look, we can take over everything. If you want us to just do your voice or you want us to just do your security, fine. But we have the capacity to do all of this, and you can consolidate your vendor relationships to just us. Yeah. And that resonates with our customers. We also, because of our size, I liken it to lead time in manufacturing. I have the head count where we can do bigger jobs, bigger customers, and get those jobs done faster than if that same customer was going to go piecemeal this out to 2 or 3 suppliers.
Well, this raises the question that so often happens in all, like just in so many different areas of business, like niche versus kind of generalist. In terms of your strategic, like as a vendor, how do you provide? Do you double down on a particular niche and become, those guys for this niche, or do you go more broad, which has its own value, the value that you just described? But also from the customer perspective, it's like, do we do a point solution? Do we go with these guys who really know X, or do we go with the guys who can just, they're one throat to choke for everything? It's that tension. I've seen that tension, that kind of dichotomy play out in so many different ways in business. Even when you're deciding on like a SaaS tool, we used to talk about this in MarTech land, marketing technology land, and in the SaaS businesses I worked at. Do we want to be a point solution, or do we want to, give the customer the entire marketing stack? So anyway. But it sounds like, Nick, you do have a position on this, at least for where STL is in terms of its own size and maturation, that you are trending toward being more of a generalist MSP. Am I right?
I think that's basically correct. And also part of my value creation, growth creation thesis is to expand our product offerings. So, I always approached customers, no matter which company I was at, asking them, what do you need? What can we provide you that we are not currently? And using that voice of the customer to really help direct us in our product offerings.
A couple more questions on MSP, and then I want to just ask some kind of broader questions about small business life, and a little bit more about the deal. On MSPs, so obviously, by definition, you're dealing with technology as the owner of an MSP. And so how much do you're probably learning a lot about the tech. How much do you need to actually learn? How much do you, Nick, need to understand all of these tools and the way they function? This is the classic, if I buy a plumbing business, do I need to learn plumbing sort of thing? How do you think, how should somebody contemplating buying an MSP approach this question?
That is a very good question. And I think about it in terms of size of the business. So if I was buying the self-funded style or size MSP that might be 1 or 2 million in revenue, and the owner has to be in there in the thick of it and designing servers and, really, you have to know the tech at that size, I think.
Yeah.
At this size, there's a leadership team here, obviously a lot of techs and engineers. At least thus far, I haven't had to dive too deep into it because I have a team that does that. So, the very first thing I did in the business was focus on cash flow. I mean, we all know how important that is. So I spent a lot of time in the very early days and weeks making sure the cash flow was good, just kind of making sure the daily operations of the business were functioning so that all of these smart and experienced people can do their jobs to the best of their ability. I certainly will get in more into the technology, but thus far it's just been making sure the business functions, making sure that people can do their job, and taking care of customers.
You talk about cash flow and how you've really, really prioritized that. That is often a learning for new small business owners, that they underestimate cash flow and how it works and how it can be tricky and actually complex. It seems like you knew that going in, that you really wanted to get your arms around how cash flowed in and out of the business. Why were you so savvy as to really, really focus on that?
Oh, I don't know if it's anything more special than just having the number of years under my belt in other businesses and knowing and understanding how important cash flow is to the business. And certainly as coming into this, day one, really not knowing anything, that just seems the obvious thing that you have to focus on. Because I've tried to explain to my folks here, who actually, they asked me a very similar question to you is, do you want to get involved in learning the tech? Maybe even why aren't you spending more time on that? And I said, look, the most important thing I need to do for the company right now is to protect it. And at least the way I think about that is making sure the cash flow is working so that we can operate the business, pay our folks, pay our vendors, and just keep functioning. So it just seems the obvious thing to do to me.
Well, and on this topic, Nick, there was a working capital infusion, was there not, at closing? Tell us about the thought there and how you approach that.
Correct. So we did fund the balance sheet with some cash at close, and we also had a very nice working line of credit with our bank, which I have not had to use yet, but it's nice to have it there. I would say if we did not fund with cash at close, things would have been tight in the beginning. So it was the right thing to do. I don't know exactly, but there could have been a couple weeks that were very hairy had we not done that. But it gives me, having that cash cushion at the beginning. I'm in a real good cash position right now. I have this line of credit. So, that's why I feel comfortable thinking about these follow-on acquisitions, particularly in the smaller size. And we've been able to immediately invest in the business, doing some things in marketing. This company was spending, close to $100,000 a year in rental cars and, reimbursing people for personal mileage. And I mean, that number just struck me as crazy. And so, I've bought several company cars now that, because I have the cash to do that. And, it's ultimately going to save us a lot of money to continue to reinvest in the business. So, I don't know whose idea it was on our team, but it was a good one to put some cash in the business.
Mm-hmm. And how did you calculate how much cash to put in? Was it like a percentage of? Must have been a percentage of something pegged to something.
Well, we were looking at the historical working capital in the business, and put about half of that amount as cash.
Gotcha. Again, a little bit more on this subject of learning the tech or not, and buying this business kind of as an outsider, not being a UCaaS expert. Why was there business buyer fit here? I should ask this question more. I really like the subject of business buyer fit. Why did this one you liked? There were things about the business that you liked that you've already told us, but why was Nick positioned to add value? And as a quick follow on, like, could you have bought a plumbing business of a similar size or a blue collar business of a similar size? Or was there something about the actual service delivery that this was technical, highly technical, plumbing is technical, but you know what I mean? Like actually working with technology, that was a particular fit for Nick.
So I have a few thoughts there, and I certainly got this question from my investor base when I brought this deal to the table. And, I would describe things, if you look at my career history, those three experiences, each one was in a different industry, fairly significantly differently. And so I was able to transition to three different industries successfully, learn what was going on in those businesses. But also, my attitude in each of those three experiences is what we're really doing is it's about the customer service, and whatever we're selling is just the widget behind that. So really focus on delivering excellent customer service, excellent customer experience, and whatever is you're selling will find its fit. I mean, we would even tell our salespeople very specifically at the chemical company, what you are doing is you are selling the customer service, and our chemicals just come along with that. And I look at this, I mean, this business is to me, it's a service business, right? I mean, you're selling this essentially software as a service to your customers. And if you're not delivering that excellent customer experience, I just don't think you're going to be successful in the long run. So some of the things this company was doing to demonstrate that is when we sign up a new customer, they have an escalation list of contacts all the way up to having the owner's cell phone number. And, so the customer, call the owner if you need to. We have a service line. So if a customer needs help, they can just call us. Whereas, on the larger side, our competitors, it cannot get somebody on the phone. You're going to send an email, go into a ticketing system, and at some point be able to interface with them, but it's not going to be over the phone. I mean, these things sound simple. They are simple, but they make a difference.
I love that. I love that thinking about that the widget, the ostensible thing you're selling is less important than the service. The service is what you're selling, and then whatever the widget is comes along for the ride. That's such an interesting flipping it on its head. And what about buying a blue collar business? Would you have done that, Nick?
I think so. In any of the companies I looked at, I would try to be very thoughtful about the fit for myself. At the chemical company, it was 500,000 square feet, largely manufacturing facilities where you're dealing with non-degreed hourly folks. So yeah, I think it would have been fine. So yeah.
Nick, I also, just going back again to this theme of the size of the business, the working capital infusion, the your attention to the cash flow in your early weeks there, in your first couple of months there. Also, in how traditional, in the traditional model, you buy a bigger business, which you did, versus self-funded, which is smaller, but you own more of it. But just the question of buying small is also one of, how much cushion there is and how much you as the buyer of the business are going to need to be really involved in the business. You've already articulated that you really haven't had to do that because there's a management layer there because you bought a business of appropriate size for that. But how do you think about like folks that you might hear on this podcast who buy a business that has $400,000, $600,000, $700,000 of SDE, which is, 20, 30, 40% of your size or less, and far fewer employees? How do when you look at them and hear those stories, how do you juxtapose that with your own?
No, I certainly have heard those guests. And look, I think anybody that goes down any one of the variations of this process of buying a business, forging your own path in life, creating your own legacy, hey, all the best. I mean, how could you say anything but congratulations to any folks doing that? I mean, it's just awesome. So, whatever fits your particular situation, yeah, is great, right? This has been a fantastic journey for me. I mean, it's changed my life. My only regret is I didn't know about this when I was younger, but perhaps I needed all the experiences to get to this point for it to be what it is. But it's one of the things I really enjoy is I have a 9-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. And so when we're ever driving around, I'm always listening to podcasts, usually your show or one of the others that are talking about search funds. And I love my kids being exposed to this world because I certainly wasn't, all of this type of stuff wasn't available when we were young. And, maybe they'll get that little seed planted, and maybe they'll start out with a little, 100,000, 200,000 SDE business on their own journey. It's awesome.
In what world, Nick? SMB? The world of SMB? What specifically do you like that they are getting a window into?
Yeah, exactly. The whole, that there are other paths out there in life than the traditional go to university, go work somewhere as a W-2, that there are other things you can do. And I think, we all in this community know the benefits and power of buying a business that has been around for a while, and the value creation opportunities there. Well,
I reading between the lines, I guess you've said directly that things for the first 2 months have gone pretty well. You're having a blast. So have you had any fetal position moments? You were well capitalized, so you also haven't had a cash crunch, it sounds like. Any fetal positions and position moments, or and also tie that into just how you feel being an owner now versus a career of being not an SMB owner. How does it feel different?
Sure. Gosh, I don't know how to describe that. It just feels amazing, frankly. When I come in here on the weekends when there's nobody here and you're walking around and it's like, this is your own place. I don't know how to describe it. But in terms of fetal positions, look, with my sticking to professional experiences, I've had unbelievably challenging things already that I've dealt with, right? Employee issues, customer issues, all the things that business folks have to deal with. So it's going to take a lot before I'm going to get into a fetal position here. So having those experiences is, I think, good. But look, we've had challenges. I'll just tell a story. I had a key person here. I think it was maybe week 2 or week 3, walk into my office and give notice. And this is a key person. And they said, look, this doesn't have anything to do with you, Nick, meaning me. They were like, I started this. I didn't know the owner was selling this business. I started this process, and now I've accepted this offer. I'm sorry, but, I like you, but, I got to go do this. So, well, why? Tell me what started you down the path of looking for another job? and they told me all of their things. And, the long and the short of it is, I said, if I fix those things, would you consider staying? And I think the person was shocked at this conversation. And, some of those things I could fix immediately. Some of them, they were going to have to trust me. And, we talked it through, and, I think there were some tears in person, and they stayed. And now they are,
wow,
shot out of a cannon, doing an unbelievable job. So earlier when I was talking about culture, that's an example.
Yeah. Phenomenal. Well, it must be so gratifying that your vision for creating strong culture or early indications are that it's just being received so well. That's got to be very exciting. We're wrapping up here, Nick, but I want to take a couple steps back into just the closing or the deal itself. The one of the, again, going back to working with an accelerator, which I think will interest people, one of the values, stated values of that is, of course, support all the way through, including doing the deal itself. So what is it, how much of the deal are you doing? Because I guess they provide, you already said they provide an M&A team. So they've kind of got, I don't know if they provide due diligence or they hook you up with a diligence provider, but there's probably a lot of diligence that's being done on your behalf versus if you were not working with the accelerator. How much of the deal fell on you, and how is that partnership with them looking like as you marched through to closing?
So in my experience, so I was still the the focal point of the whole process. It's my responsibility to organize everything involved in the closing. I'm the point person, regardless of what support we had. So we certainly did have outside legal, outside QOV provider, but I'm coordinating all of those activities and reviewing it and summarizing and all of this type of stuff. Novastone for me was very helpful in the modeling, just because that's not my background. I'm not an Excel wizard, so they could help and assist there and run all the different scenarios. And obviously they're reviewing all the due diligence reports as well. We're working together as a team. I also needed to create the kind of the internal investment memo, this huge document that describes the value creation, theses, the whole background of the company, the, potential returns, all of this type of stuff. So, it was very helpful to me to have them involved. It was a very good partnership. And at the end of the day, I probably shouldn't talk about specifics, but to get to close, just like any close, there's stuff happening even at the last minute, basically. And Novastone needed to really step up to do some things to make the close happen, and they did. I mean, they made it happen at the last hour to get it to the finish line. One of the, search, there's many aspects of the search for the searcher that can be very lonely, right? Yeah, I think all of your guests probably talk about this.
Yeah.
The close was was certainly interesting. As I mentioned, the searcher is the point person, at least in my case, and probably in most cases. So, you're the recipient of all the stress from the broker, from the seller, from your deal team, your legal, the Novastone folks in this particular example. And I've heard other searchers talk about, it's important to have your support mechanism. And I've heard very specific examples. I would call my lawyer and just unleash and cry and, fall apart and they would bring me back. I would just suggest to think about that's not perhaps the best way to do it. Certainly have your support, but your deal team maybe isn't the best support people. I would suggest you need to start acting as the CEO during that phase and demonstrating that you can handle the stress of a close and you can handle people treating you poorly for whatever reason because of their own processes in the closing, and act as the CEO and demonstrate that you can handle this stress, so you can certainly handle the stress of owning the business. Mm-hmm. Just don't rely on your deal team as your own personal support mechanism.
That's great, Nick. What a lesson in leadership. You gotta choose your sounding boards and the shoulders that you cry on carefully. You gotta be aware of who your audience is. Yeah. And I think this will be my last question, Nick. The kind of about Novastone, but more generally, in tying it into traditional versus self-funded, one of the things too that people like about self-funded, you can have investors in self-funded, of course. So maybe this just applies to self-funded who have no investors, is not having investors. So people who buy businesses are entrepreneurial, independent, probably don't love, someone else telling them what to do. Generally, investors don't tell you what to do, but in some moments they might, or they might strategically kind of compel you in a certain direction. Anyway, investors can certainly feel like bosses. You have had VCs back in the early 2000s, and you've already said that was before founder friendliness was a thing. You have Novastone, who are your investors, and then you had complicated experiences, working under at your business with your father-in-law. So you've had other authority experiences. How do you feel about in now today kind of the weight of investors. You are expected and will only be rewarded if you hit certain growth hurdles. Frankly, they own the vast majority of this business, but it still feels like I'm hearing you and the way you're talking about it still feels like your business. So just riff a little bit on that, how the role and the presence of investors plays into the psychological piece of this.
Sure. So, I certainly have heard other guests of yours that describe a more active role from their investor base. At least thus far with Novastone and their other, quote, my colleagues that have acquired businesses in the program, Novastone, although they're very collaborative, they're expecting you to run the business. They're not interested in getting in here and being very specific about opinions on what should be done. A whole part of their program is they're really only partnering with what they call mid-career professionals. So people with a track record. I think that's part of the reason why their interview process is so rigorous, because at the end of the day, in the size of their program, 50 plus searchers, they need to have folks that they can rely on to run the business. So that is a good fit for me personally in that style. Now, however, I do like the fact that there are investors here. That keeps me honest. Not that I need that, but I do like that. We are playing a serious game here of business. Although I talk about this culture aspect, I am very motivated professionally in growth, in growing businesses. And I'm very clear with our folks here, we are going to double this business in a certain time frame. Like that is going to happen. And we can have fun along the way, but that's where we're going. And we're going to hold that line. So, and additionally, I wanted to have a board. I've always worked with a board at every point in my career, basically. And, I've been able to recruit a series of individuals that I've worked with before that I know will hold me accountable. And as I've described that here in the company, because of course, these folks here have no experience within any board arrangement or anything. So, look, folks, this is a good thing. These folks here, we can learn from them, but also they hold me accountable to all the things that I'm saying that we're going to do. This is all positive. This is all good.
Thank you for that, Nick. Anything else that I have failed to ask that you wanted to make sure you got in?
No, we covered quite a bit. Again, I appreciate the opportunity. Perhaps it sounded I came into this whole search with it being a bit naive, which was true, but having fine resources such as your podcast, I really have enjoyed listening to it and all the guests. It's been very helpful along the journey. So, it was very exciting to me to finally be one of the folks telling their story. So thanks for that.
That's awesome, Nick. I appreciate your saying that. That's of course, very gratifying for me to hear. If people want to reach out to you, Nick, how do you prefer that they do that?
Oh, perhaps the easiest way, you should be able to find me on LinkedIn, Nick Akers with STL Communications. And I would further offer, just because so many people were helpful to me along the way, that if I can be helpful to anybody, feel free to contact me. Maybe a searcher is acquiring a business. We could do an IT assessment for them, either pre or post, free of charge. Let them know what their situation is and opportunities for them. I'd be happy to be helpful in any way I can.
Well, I don't want to reopen the conversation that we're bringing to a close, but a searcher that I will be interviewing, not for a couple months, said to me in our pre-call, IT diligence is, at least in his story, was the most overlooked thing. It should be top of the list. It's never talked about. It's been very challenging for him. So more to come on IT due diligence. Very nice. Thank you, Nick Akers. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week, so tons of new interviews and stories to come. Stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.